Paraphrasing Toshiki Shimuro's last line in the original 1954 movie Godzilla, someday another Godzilla may appear. That comment suggested that their hard-won victory against Godzilla was perhaps short-lived. It also foreshadowed the dozens of more movies Godzilla would appear in and cause terror, wreak havoc. Now, like the Godzilla movies that have come for decades now, how many times after you battled so hard to lose the weight did your food monster, like Godzilla, come back and win? And in your case, the weight came back on. Hi, I'm Jason Stanley, a social research scientist focusing on field research and clinical trials on obesity. I'm here to help you understand and heal that unrelenting urge to eat when you're really not hungry and continue eating far, far past full. And we call that urge the food monster. Now, personally, I suffered from yo-yo overweight and obesity for decades, meaning I've been where you are now. Now, my job here is giving you the freedom from your food monster. Today, we're going to talk about how big is your food monster. So let's dive in. Previously, I've introduced the concept of your weight being driven by a compulsion that is a brain-based patterning. It's a compulsion in the brain, not your character, not your thinking, not your personality. It's a physical thing in the brain. We call that compulsion the food monster. So let me ask you, does this sound familiar? That you experience this urge as a continuous, even sometimes unrelenting anxiety to eat? And does it make sense to you that when you find yourself eating, it's a way to relax? It's why we call it comfort food. So does that kind of make sense that when you eat, you can kind of relax a little bit? Now, what was not discussed about this thing, this food monster, is can the food monster be larger or smaller? Now, I realize a lot of you guys are not as old as I am, so your memory may not include things like the 1954 Godzilla movie, and certainly not the Flintstones cartoon. And see, I compare often the Flintstones dinosaur, which was their puppy, Dino the Dino. It was a little cute little puppy kind of a thing that was there. It was part of their fun thing. So is your food monster kind of that little cute little Dino the Dino, or is it that big monster Godzilla? And so maybe a more current way to look at that is, let's take a look at dogs. Now imagine you or somebody else, hopefully not you, but there's a person who has a next door neighbor and they have this huge, vicious Rottweiler dog. It's one of those, not only is it big, but it's one that's been taught to be vicious. And every time they walk out their front door, that Rottweiler runs to the end of their rope. Now that's all they have is a rope tied to a stake in the ground. There's no fence. So that Rottweiler comes out charging and drooling and barking. And, this is a life-threatening animal. Or is it more like the guy down the street who has a nice chain link fence? It's very secure and sturdy. And inside is this little fluff ball, a little Yorkshire Terrier, what we call a Yorkie, right? Now, every time anybody walks by that fence, yak, 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 yip, 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 yip. And sure enough, that yipping is absolutely irritating. And even if the dog were to get out, what's it going to do? It's going to nip you at the ankle. It might draw blood, but it's not life-threatening. So which is your food monster? Dino the Dino, Godzilla, right? The little fluffball Yorkie, or that monstrous Rottweiler? So when we ask that question, what's built into that is, can it be one or the other? Absolutely, yes. But it's not just one or the other. It's a continuum. So it goes from small to modest all the way up to enormous. What does it mean then to have a smaller or a larger compulsion, your food monster? What does it mean to have that in real life? These are nice thoughts, and it could be good for a lecture or something like that. But in real life, let's translate this back to you and I. So a minor compulsion, what does that mean? Well, it means that if it's really small, that means that the threshold of stress that causes you to want to eat, the threshold of stress is going to be pretty high. Things have to get kind of bad before you're in that place where you have to go eat, where you have to have comfort food. And the result of that is, of course, is modest overweight, yo-yo success with weight loss. So get the weight off, you kind of hold it down for a while, and then it comes back. Let's say somewhere in the middle, it's a modest level compulsion. Well, it's very easy. That threshold for stress starts coming down. So it takes less stress to get you in a place where you're really feeling the urge to eat past full, and it's harder and harder and harder for you to stop when you know you're already full. And of course, the result of that can be modest, moderate success, yo-yo success, some obesity, some heavy, overweight, that kind of in the middle there, it correlates perfectly, or the extreme compulsion. All of those things go away. Stress isn't required. The person who's, say, 400 pounds, that really deep level of morbid obesity, they don't require external stress or even having a bad day, because their stress is built in for them. And quite frankly, just their own weight is emotionally distressful enough. So that results in unwavering morbid obesity. So that's kind of where that thing fits. But then we have to ask the question, are there other things that can impact this level of compulsion that therefore impacts the level of your obesity? And absolutely, not only can some other things impact it, they do. They absolutely do. And one of those, I'm only going to give you two, but one of those right off the top is built into the conversation we just had. And that is current day, right now, stress. You see, if you have that little tiny food monster, it takes a high level of stress before it starts impacting you. If you have a medium-sized food monster, that level of stress, the barrier becomes lower. So less stress has you overeating more. So and all the way up to the extreme compulsion thing, which doesn't require stress at all. So your stress absolutely impacts that. Now that is going to be the topic of some videos later on, how day-to-day stress impacts you now. Today's topic is there a difference in the size of your compulsion, and what's the impact? So the other thing that goes on here that not only can, but does have impact, an idea that we call, especially in the neuroplasticity research arena and clinical support arena, is neurons that fire together, wire together. And what that essentially means is, let's say you have the compulsion to overeat. Well, are there other things that happen while you are eating, or while you are comfort eating, while you are eating to reduce and kind of calm that anxiety? Those things over time start building the same neural pathway as your primary compulsion. So the neurons that fire together, those habits, those habitual things that go along with it, or those signals, they become wired together. So one impetus sets off that initial compulsion, and all these other behaviors get engaged. And again, just like stress, we're going to talk about that in its own videos. So we say, okay, good. We know that we have either larger or smaller food monster, and we know that there are other things. So let's go back to this issue of big or small. What does this do for us? Why are you here? What can you get out of this? Just understanding this compulsion thing, and that you have a large or small food monster, that helps you understand that, first of all, number one, regardless of how heavy you've been, regardless of how many times you've gained the weight back, it hasn't been your fault. And just that understanding is a very big thing. Let's look at that. Say, if I feel horrible, I feel like a failure, all of those things that come to us after we've gained the weight back or after we promised ourselves, our loved ones, that we're not going to overeat again or we're not going to have that whatever it is, and then we eat it anyway, it's really relieving to know it wasn't your fault. Now, I'm not giving you permission just to eat anything, everything. That will never be the case. But understand that it's not your fault, that something bigger or deeper than you is driving that urge. Yes, you have to do something about it, but it's not your fault that it's there, and it's not your fault that the compulsion has won. Whew. You see, that comes right back to that present day stress. If you can take that off of your shoulders, take that weight off, it's a big deal. And by just losing that, now you start getting a handle on your present day stress. Also, by understanding this, we really get an insight. You get a feeling. You may not know all the details. We'll go into that in a moment, but you get a feeling for, wow, is this thing going to take some time and effort? Or is it something that's going to be relatively reasonable to deal with, to heal these brain issues and to heal these compulsions and to heal these other patterns that have wired along with my compulsion? Now, I'm going to ask you, if you feel you're learning important insights about your struggles with obesity, please subscribe. However, if you do not want to wait for the weekly videos to be released, you can check out my website and get a free copy of my ebook at foodmonsterfreedom.com. I'll put a copy of the link in the description below. Also, you can even sign up for a free consultation and kind of see if this whole Food Monster Freedom program may be a fit for you. Again, the website is in the description below. So let's get back to what can be done. Now we understand that there is a variance. Okay, what can be done about that? Well, first of all, there's a therapy that has been developed. I developed it in research working with obese people, and we did a clinical study that showed how this works, and it's very, very effective. And in the process, years of work, we developed specialized havening therapy that can and does heal the permanent pathways that were patterned. You might ask, why specialized havening therapy? Let me ask the question. Let me put it in a different perspective. Would you go to, say, a podiatrist, a foot doctor, for an ear infection or for prenatal care? All qualified people, but no, absolutely not. And the same thing in reverse. You wouldn't go to a ear, throat, and nose specialist if you're having serious problems with your feet. That's the same thing with specialized havening. The obesity, the requirements, and the understanding of what is the root of obesity is very different than the understanding of trauma, which is what your general havening practitioner has been trained and focused on. So what will a specialized therapist do for you? Well, first of all, to the crux of this whole video, they will help determine the size of your food monster. Absolutely get a handle on it. To do that, they're going to take a deep dive into the childhood factors, which are your personality at the time, and we'll kind of work with you on that. Was your childhood pleasant or stressful, and how do these things impact the development of your food monster? Also, the consistency of acceptance as a child. So were you feeling accepted and maybe even loved while eating? That consistency is important. We'll work with you to help you really get a handle on that. Also, dig into the adult factors that have enhanced those factors that came out of childhood. That's back to the neurons that fire together and wire together. So you see, it's a relatively complex thing. I would wish I could tell you, here, I'm going to give you these techniques, go and do it yourself. We tried that in the research, again, another video for that, but it just didn't work. We have to have trained professionals to help you create a multifaceted, realistic plan for healing those connections in the brain, healing that food monster. So once that is put together, that realistic plan, then you and your therapist will implement the plan with very specific techniques to heal your food monster compulsion to eat. Until the next time, thank you for watching.